So today I've actually started sampling for the hashtag scarf, a pattern I found on the Woolery's website. And I will put the link in the description under this video. Just as a reference, this is what the finished scarf looks like. And there's something a little strange going on. Perhaps it's just this photo. Uh, but what I see in this photo is 5 rows of the actual hashtag pattern. And we'll see when we look at my version on the loom that I've got 4. So I'm going to take a quick second to pop underneath the loom to see if I threaded it backwards, which is not at all unlikely. And I did not. So the only other possible explanation is that the draft they provided with this project is not the one they actually used to weave the scarf, which is no big deal. It's fine. And in fact, the other thing I want to point out now that we're looking at my samples is I'm using fatter yarn. I'm using worsted weight in my warp and fingering weight in my weft. And things are just kind of bigger in scale. And again, this might be a design choice that they made after weaving the sample in the project photograph. But again, it's no big deal. And what else have I learned from my sample? I have learned that, remember I had 2 different kinds of yarn that I was testing out for colors. So I had a Knit Picks commercial yarn, a singles, 30% nylon if memory serves, and 70% non-superwash wool. And then a Greenwood Fiberworks Simply Sock yarn, which was, again, if memory serves, 80% superwash and 20% nylon. I tried out both these colors on my sample. And what I learned is I don't like either of them. And by I don't like either of them, I mean that I feel that neither of them are really going to work for this project. So when my sister-in-law, my wonderful sister-in-law, saw pictures of the yarns, the color she liked was this one. And so what I'm seeing by weaving a sample is that on both of these samples, so I went from here, I actually spread the warp with the Knit Picks yarn. From this up to here is the Knit Picks, and then from here is the Greenwood Simply Sock. Is in both of them, the variegated nature of the yarn is taking over. And so all I really see now, unless I look at the actual hashtaggy parts, is the variegated colorway. And when you think about it, that's not all that. So remember that this is what my sample square had looked like for the Greenwood Fiberworks. And this is what my sample square had looked like for the Knit Picks yarn. And in both of them, if I had really thought about it, I would have realized, oh yeah, that contrast color does take over. And put it in a larger scale on the woven fabric, and it totally takes over. If I were weaving this scarf for myself, I would go with this combination because I can't wear that more yellowy type of green, but I'm not. I am weaving this for my sister-in-law who specifically liked this darker green of the hand-spun yarn best of all, and it's getting lost in here. So I'm going to try one more sample, which is using a black weft that is not only black, but a heavier weight than the sock yarns I was using. This is a Cloudborne Fibers, I think sport weight, maybe DK weight, and it's much closer in size to my warp yarn. So we'll see how that goes. And I want to make one more point about tying on before I wind everything back onto the cloth beam. So this scarf uses the loom lace for twisted fringe. So I actually made my ties onto the apron bar with much longer ends than I normally would, so that I would have enough even after taking out all the woven fabric, all the all the woven samples, I would have enough left over for fringe. And this is, again, something you can choose to do as the weaver. I find it easier than trying to put a spacer in like I did with those bamboo scarves that I made. It's just making longer tails on my warp bundles so that I've got plenty and I won't have to fudge anything after I take this off the loom. So let me wind everything back on and then we'll get started with the black weft. So while I'm setting up my boat shuttle with a bobbin wand with the black weft, I want to mention a couple of other quick things. The first is that it turns out that warping a project with 112 ends, which is what this scarf has, as opposed to 300, 400, like my last few projects, oh my gosh, this goes so much faster. I had this loom warped up faster than you could ever imagine. Faster than I ever could imagine at any rate. So that was very pleasant to be able to wind two warp chains and get this loom warped up in maybe 2 hours, as opposed to the what felt like endless hours I spent warping much finer projects. The second thing I want to point out is with hand spun yarn that I did not give a hard finish to, by which I mean I could have, when I was when I was setting the twist, I could have chosen to basically felt the texture of the yarn by alternating dipping it and rubbing it in an ice bath and a hot bath. That would have given the yarn a hard finish. It would not fluff up at all. But I didn't do that, and I'm really glad I didn't, because I didn't want a scarf with a hard finish, even though obviously I spun this yarn long before I had any idea of making a scarf with it. You can always hard finish a hand spun yarn later. It has to be in skeins, but it's easy enough to do. So I rarely do that at the beginning unless I know I'm doing something that is going to benefit from a hard finish. So this has a soft finish, and because of that, I warped the loom from back to front, which means that on my warp chain, I took the ends closest to the cross and I ran another apron bar through them, lashed that apron bar to the rear apron beam back by my warp beam, and put a rattle on my loom and beamed the warp with leaf sticks. This is a really common practice. I encourage you to watch other people doing this. There's a million YouTube videos out there because I'm still fiddling and playing with warping methods. But anyway, warping from back to front means that the warp yarn did not go through the heddles as it was going around the warp beam. It just went through the leaf sticks and through the rattle and went straight onto the warp beam. This means there was less abrasion. And because this is a soft finish yarn, that was what I preferred. And in fact, I have not yet had any warp yarns break, uh, which feels to me, when you're using hand spun warp, like a mark of success. I think I remember telling you that this Greenwood Fiberworks yarn, lovely as it is, had gotten damaged by moths in my old house. And if I had chosen to use this as warp yarn, oh my gosh, it would have been ping, 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 because every so often on the skein, there was suddenly a weak spot. So uh, after I warped after I beamed the warp, I had the top of the beater and the reed out of the beater, and then I proceeded to thread the loom from the front, thread the heddles from the front. And this is a 6-shaft pattern. So again, some of my warping aids, like the little gizmo that puts my shafts up on a slant, really, really helpful. And then I threaded the reed. So the original project called for a 10, no, actually a 12 ends per inch dent. I tested my warp yarn with a ruler and found that it measures out to 10 ends per inch, and that would mean for plain weave, choosing to use 5 ends per inch on the reed, but I actually went up to 8 because I want this to be a dense fabric since it's for a scarf. So I slayed the reed, tied on at the front apron bar, realized after the fact that my apron bar had gone up and around my trap for my standard floor loom, and then I had to untie it and do it all over again. But regardless, I was off and weaving pretty quickly. So let's just do a couple of plain weave picks to see what starts to happen when I use a solid color dark weft yarn. And I am deliberately starting my weaving on my right side because I always prefer to have my right side be my odd number picks and my left side be my even number picks. And one other thing to keep in mind as I do this, I am using an extremely light bead because the pattern designer said use a light bead because if you pack in too much in these hashtag areas, it won't turn out the way you expected. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to do 6 total repeats of this 1 and 2 treadle thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Just count for a second. 9, 10, 11, 12, and now, and I'm going to turn the camera for a sec, so hang on, bear with me. I've got my treadling written on one of my magic erasable postcards and taped to the loom. Man, I love those little cards. They are just the bomb because I can reuse them over and over again or keep them and take a photo, whatever I want. Okay, so I'm done with treadles 1 and 2. Now I go to 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Whoopsie. 5, 6. Treadles 3 and 4 for 6 picks, and then and you can see that this is making the horizontal bars of the hashtag, and now treadles 5 and 6 will make the vertical ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so what do we learn from this sample? The black is still having a really marked effect, and I say really marked effect. And so what I might do now is purchase some commercial yarn because I won't have enough weft yarn in this hand spun. I might purchase a yarn that is really similar in color and doesn't variegate or variegates only very slightly and try that out for my next sample because I really want my sister-in-law to love this scarf, and all these contrasting weft yarns are still kind of taking over. So it's worth it to me to buy one more skein of yarn because that's all I'll need for this weft yarn. Buy one more skein of yarn. If I had something in my stash, I would use it, but I know that I don't. Buy one more skein of yarn, try it out, see how it goes, and take it from there.